It's really frustrating in the last weeks. Trump originally started with comments that, February 1st, he was going to place tariffs on Canadian products going south. And then he changed. It went to the 4th of February. And then as of late yesterday afternoon, those threats changed, and there's an exemption for 30 days. So there's a lot of uncertainty around this, and we really don't know how to react. But if these tariffs do go through, and he does what he's promising he's going to do, it's not going to be great for especially Saskatchewan municipalities and our members.
Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Today we are turning our attention to rural Canada, where communities are bracing for significant challenges following the announcement that President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods will now take effect in March rather than February as first proposed. Now, these tariffs will touch every corner of our economy, but rural municipalities, especially those rooted in agriculture and the resource industries, could face some of the most severe impacts. Saskatchewan farmers, manufacturers, and exporters rely heavily on cross-border trade. And with the 25% tariff looming, the ripple effects will be felt from the family farm to municipal budgets. To help us better understand these tariffs mean for rural Saskatchewan, we sat down with Bill Huber, president of the Saskatchewan Association of Rural Municipalities. In our one-on-one conversation, President Huber will share his hopes for how Canada will navigate these crises, his realistic expectations for what lies ahead, and how rural municipalities are preparing to weather the storm. President Huber, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about what is going on in the global world right now with everything that is going on south of the border and how it's impacting municipalities in rural Saskatchewan. As of this recording, Donald Trump has given a pause to any tariffs that are going to be placed on Canadian goods and energy resources going into the United States until March. What was your initial thoughts after that announcement that came out yesterday from President Trump?
Well, thanks, Chris, for the opportunity. But it's really frustrating in the last weeks. Trump originally started with comments that, February 1st, he was going to place tariffs on Canadian products going south. And then he changed. It went to the 4th of February. And then as of late yesterday afternoon, those threats changed, and there's an exemption for 30 days. So there's a lot of uncertainty around this, and we really don't know how to react. But if these tariffs do go through, and he does what he's promising he's going to do, it's not going to be great for especially Saskatchewan municipalities and our members, because 90% of our members are farmers or ag related. So it will have devastating effects on our economy and our profitability.
How so? Because you're right. The majority of rural Saskatchewan is based in the agriculture sector or even the critical mineral sector as well, with uranium, with a lot of potash, which gets exported into the United States. How do you see this impacting rural municipalities if the president follows through on his word in March?
Well, as agriculture producers, and when I stated 90% of our members are ag related somehow, a lot of farmers are large and small, and it'll affect each and every one of us. Just going to start with canola, for example. We grow a lot of canola. We call it our Cinderella crop here in Saskatchewan. It's a costly crop to grow, and we depend on exports. And 90% of our oil that is crushed in Saskatchewan goes to the U.S. Now, with the tariffs coming on, that's going to affect the flow of that oil going south. But it's not only the canola oil itself; it also is the byproduct of the canola oil for feed purposes. So livestock is another big industry in Saskatchewan, and that will directly affect the livestock industry. We know that there's a shortage of beef in North America, and that's why prices are up where they are now. But if there is these tariffs put on, it's going to affect feed costs, and Americans are going to the feedlot operators in the U.S. are going to use that as a leverage. That it's going to affect their bottom line, and it will reduce bids on Canadian cattle going south. So it'll have a big effect on the livestock industry. but it'll also affect the seed part of it going to the U.S. and other countries. So that's a big part of it. Durum is another crop that goes south quite a bit. Those prices will be directly affected. So it's very concerning. And I guess one thing I'd like to add, Chris, is that we have to be thankful for the provincial government in Saskatchewan prior to Trump's election, even that in the past couple of years they've reached out to other countries, Mexico, Dubai. There was a trade mission to Dubai, and they're trying to open up new markets. And in case these tariffs do come on and become reality, there still is a little hope and a light at the end of the tunnel that we have some of these other markets to depend on. But of course, the U.S. is our number one market, and they're the closest trading partner we have and the most valuable. So somehow we have to keep that relationship.
One of the things that President Trump has said about why he would be imposing these tariffs is the flow of immigrants across the border, the flow of fentanyl across the border. Now, many of your rural municipalities are border municipalities with either Montana or North Dakota. And I'm just making sure on my map here. Yes, those are the only two states that you border. What is SARM telling your border municipalities to watch out for? Are you taking the lead, or is the province taking the lead to work with your rural municipalities who border the two states to address these issues that President Trump has been talking about?
Well, we're not taking the lead on it, but the province did. The minister was responsible for that. Had a news release out a couple of weeks ago. We were part of that. We had a great discussion with them, and they've committed to, I think, $90 million. There's going to be 16 more RCMP officers, Border Patrol people in place. There's going to be a lot of money spent and a lot more staff and visibility there for border protection. So I think Saskatchewan's done its part. It's a start. I think they're committed to further improving that. I know our premier has been in discussions and negotiations with several U.S. state representatives, whether they're senators or governors. So they are doing that work behind the scenes, and we have committed to that, to stepping up our border security. And SARMS totally supports that, along with our members.
What's the message you're telling your rural municipal leaders along the southern border right now? Because they're probably as in flux as everyone else is right now, but they're seeing it firsthand because they are on the border, and that would impact them first for that potential closing of those tariffs.
Well, we really haven't told them anything because we're not sure what's happening. It changes not daily, but hourly, honestly, and so we're so unsure of what the next day or hours or weeks ahead are going to look like. And we're on top of it. Our staff is continually monitoring the situation through media outlets, and really until we have some more firm commitments, that there's not much we can really tell our members about at this time. That other than that, we're on top of it and we're working in their best interests at all times.
You talked about how Scott Moe and the provincial government, Premier Scott Moe and the provincial government have been opening trade offices around the world. What would you like to see the province do a little bit more to help municipalities address this issue? Or are they doing enough right now? And what's your message to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? Because we have a federal government that is so in flux right now. We're not sure who's actually leading the government because he's halfway out the door and someone else is about to take over when these new tariffs are about to be put into place.
Yes, I agree. As far as the provincial government goes, I don't know what more we can tell them or ask them to do. I think I'm in agreement with what they're doing. I think our members are somewhat supportive of them. Sometimes, the message is getting there quietly rather than being more retaliatory. I don't think we need to start a trade war with them by issuing a whole bunch of tariffs on. We do have to make the U.S. government and Trump aware that we're not just a bunch of sissies sitting here letting them do anything he wants. But I think a part of this whole problem leads to our leadership in the federal government. And I think the president has stated that in some of his media releases. And I think if we had a different leadership in Ottawa right now, I think things would be a little better. It's very disappointing. This is happening at this time when we have a prime minister that stepped down as a leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, but he remains as prime minister. They're going through a leadership review. There will be a new leader picked here in the months ahead, and we don't know who that's going to be, but I think it's uncertain when we're going to have a federal election. And those are concerning things. And I honestly believe, and I think our majority of our members believe, that if we had a change in government, we would see a different reaction from south of the border from President Trump. Because he is a protectionist, he's an American patriot, and he's going to make America better again. But it's going to take him some time to realize that maybe it shouldn't be at the cost of the Canadian public and businesses.
Farmers across Saskatchewan in rural municipalities are looking for answers, and it sounds like we don't have answers. What's your message to farmers today? Because you're right, we are in this flux. We don't know what the next hour is going to be. By the time this airs, it could be a completely different conversation we should have had. So what do you tell farmers who might be asking you in your own backyard, in your own community, Bill, help us because we need help and we don't know if March 1st, I'm going to have to try and figure out what to do with this abundance of grain, canola, cattle that's in my backyard that I traditionally ship down south because no one wants to buy it anymore.
Well, I know. I think the first thing I'd like to tell them is be cautious. Make sure you pay attention to the markets. Get your pricing options in place. Know what you want, what your costs are, so that you can at least cover that cost. We've seen canola prices yesterday flat. They were in that $13 range at a lot of the country terminals. And Louis Dreyfus, for example, had no bids out at all. Bases were there, and they widened them. But this morning, prices were up. We had targets triggering at $14. After the news release last night, where they had a 30-day exemption. So, and same with livestock. Prices have rallied in the last couple of weeks. Fat cattle in the U.S. and on the rail, we're still up $2 to $4 a hundredweight. So those things are encouraging. But I think we have to make sure we're watching this every day. If you've got people hired to do your market analysis or selling your product, make sure you know what you need to sell that to make a profit.
Is SARM or yourself, the organization SARM or yourself, reaching out to municipalities across the border to start internal dialogue to say, how can we work together to ensure that these tariffs don't happen? Because what happens on our side of the border and happens on your side of the border is going to impact us both. Or are you, again, waiting to see if these tariffs actually do come before you start those conversations?
Well, we're waiting to see, I think, what's really going to happen, and for sure, because we have no guarantee where we're at yet. And, there's some optimism out there that members are thinking they're never going to happen. I talked to one of our crop input retailers this morning, just on a personal note. And, they're saying that they really don't think this is all going to happen. They think there's going to be some change in it. If Canada lives up to its commitment to ensure that border security, I think that's number one. If we can get some more dialogue and better understanding from our federal counterparts, I think we'll be in a better place. But we are having an annual convention coming up in mid-March. That'll be the top. We'll know more by then, by March 1st, what happens. And it'll certainly be on the table for discussion, throughout the 3-day convention. So until then, I don't know what else we can do, really.
So what do you do? I know that's going to be the stupid question I have to ask, but are you just in a wait and see position now? Like, it seems like we are all in this wait and see position as the federal government, the provincial governments, and the United States governments work together to try to rectify the situation. But what's your message to Saskatchewan residents, to Canadians, to Americans who might be listening to this or watching this to say, we don't want the tariffs?
Well, we don't want the tariffs, and I think everybody, that's listening will appreciate that. But we have to appreciate what our provincial government, our Minister of Trade has done, Minister Kading. He's probably not getting much sleep these last few weeks, and they're working, diligently to in our best interests, and we don't want to interfere with that. We continually talk to our MLAs and our cabinet ministers about the concerns we have, and they're pushing forward and doing what they can behind the scenes, and sometimes the noisy wheel gets the grease, but maybe in some cases it's better if we just sit back until we really know what position we're in, and then work from there. So we're supportive of the provincial government. We're hoping that the federal counterparts come on side and have a more realistic, business-like approach to some of this, rather than just countervailing other tariffs and restricting and imposing things on the Americans. I think we need to have a good working relationship.
President Huber, it's always a pleasure to sit down with you and talk about everything rural in Saskatchewan. I feel like this is probably our first of many conversations we're going to be having about internal trades going in and out of Saskatchewan over the next few years. I look forward to meeting you again up in Saskatoon for your SARM convention, and we'll continue this conversation then. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. We appreciate it each and every time. It's great. Thank you.
Alberta's rural communities, like those in Saskatchewan, are on the front lines of this economic uncertainty. Now, with deep ties to agriculture, energy, and manufacturing, rural Alberta's economy is closely intertwined with cross-border trade. Now, these tariffs will send shockwaves through these key industries, potentially impacting everything from farm operations to infrastructure projects. Now, to gain valuable insights into how rural Alberta is preparing for this fallout, we spoke with Cara Westerland, President of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. President Westerland shared her thoughts on the potential impacts of these tariffs, how rural communities are strategizing for the future, and the support needed from the provincial and federal leaders to navigate this turbulent time. President Wonderland, thank you so much for doing this, sitting down and talking about this unprecedented time that municipalities are in right now, with the now clock ticking towards March, with potential tariffs from Donald Trump on Canadian goods and resources in Alberta and across Canada. How is RMA watching this unfold, and what is your initial reactions to a potential tariff from Donald Trump?
Well, we are like everyone else listening and watching today is we are waiting and watching with bated breath. I think for the most part, we've all been glued to our media sources and our TVs, waiting for the next move. We are on the edge of our seat, just like everybody else is, and wondering what strange corner we will turn next.
Alberta has a very large agriculture resource industry that a lot of your member municipalities, as president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta, rely on. What are you hearing from your members in the last few weeks, today, over the next few days? What are you hearing from them about these tariffs and what this potentially could mean to their local economies?
Well, it could have huge impacts, obviously, local. So not only the agricultural side of things, but obviously oil and gas industry, as well as forestry too, as well. This potentially could have huge impacts, not only on residents and their own households, but your municipal budgets too, as well. So like I said, we're watching very closely. It's an interesting time and place to be as an organization. RMA obviously is nonpartisan, so we're incredibly cautious which way we tend to lean. And obviously, this is the loaded political hot potato, probably of 2025. So.
We often joke that Canada and the United States share the longest undefended border in all of the world. Now, some of your members, whether it be Cypress County, whether it be the county of 40 miles, whether it be Cardston County, Warner County, you name it, these members butt up against Montana, Idaho, and they're on the front lines. We talk about Alberta being on the front line, but they're actually on the front lines. What are you hoping that these members are doing today to help protect our border? Because what we're hearing from Donald Trump is we got to protect our border. We got to stop the flow of fentanyl. We got to stop the flow of illegal immigrants going to and from America. And we have a border that people can just walk across.
Yes, and it's interesting too, and talking with some of our members down south, it's actually an interesting note. Some of them actually own land on both sides of the border. So that's an interesting take on this too as well. So though there's a few individuals in a very interesting location that have to deal with that too. I think you're not going to find pushback from anyone, especially when we're talking about, a fight on drugs per se. I know we're picking on fentanyl, but just drugs, organized crime. Obviously, we have an issue with unregistered firearms and banned firearms coming across borders, both sides. And I think any steps in a direction of stopping the flow of any of those illegal, I guess, contrabands either way is a positive and good step in the right direction. So, you can't knock the U.S. For wanting to protect their citizens, and same we should be doing the same on our border. But at the same time, we love our neighbors to the south, and for the most part, our neighbors to the south love us too. So during this political uncertainty and time of uncertainty, I sure hope we get back to some conversations around some common sense, and we come up with some long-lasting solutions to some of the issues that we've been facing, quite frankly, for a number of years.
Premier Daniel Smith has announced some measures to tackle what Donald Trump has been talking about why he's imposing these tariffs, whether that be flying Black Hawk helicopters along the border, beefing up sheriffs at the Coots crossing. Do you support these measures, and what are you hoping to hear from the Premier specifically to help municipalities navigate this uncertain future that we have right now?
Well, I think anytime that we take steps to protect our borders and protect our people, I mean, it's a step in the right direction. But we need to be really cautious and careful too that we're not trying to pigeonhole the lawful citizens that we do have out there. So making difficult travel more difficult, I don't think is the solution either. It's an interesting perspective. I personally have a family member that's an RCMP member in southern BC, and even talking with him and hearing the stories, there's that, the stories and, quite frankly, the rumors about how unprotected the border is. But yet he shares with me stories and time again of working hand in hand with law officials from the south in protecting those borders, particularly in I'm going to say the Cultus Lake area is where they're at there in the mountains. There is technology out there. For the most part, we know where people are moving, where they're coming across, and if they try to go through the mountains, which they do in some situations, they're often caught. A lot of those stories obviously don't hit the news, so it's weeding, I guess, weeding your way through what's fact and what's fiction too, and dealing with the rumor mill on that side. Obviously, from our premier standpoint and from a municipal standpoint. I mean, our bottom lines as a municipality, we budget very carefully. And any time that we look at cost increases anywhere in our budgets has a detriment to our communities. Many municipalities have their budgets already set. So an interim budget was by law had to be passed before December 31st of 2024, with final budget approvals coming here in April. So obviously, we hope both the provincial and the federal government and the U.S. Government sit down and have some, really frank conversations, because this uncertainty isn't helping anybody. I don't think it's helping our friends down to the south, and it quite frankly isn't helping any of our residents or any businesses on either side. And it's
just
actually,
on the budget,
it's
just
doing
on
a
the
lot of.
budget for a second, if you don't mind me interjecting, because you're right, this could effectively change your municipal budgets. A 25% tariff, a 10% tariff on energy resources, which Alberta is an energy hub, could decimate municipalities who are struggling already. What's your message to member municipalities right now? Because they're probably looking at this budget, this tariff, and going, this could hurt us, and it could potentially make us even further behind.
Well, and it's that crystal ball right now. It's anybody's guess what we're going to be looking at. But obviously, the two solutions that we have municipally, and remember, I'm a councillor too in Brazeau County, is either cancel projects,
Yep,
or you raise property taxes. And neither option is great for anyone. And a lot of municipalities have already done a lot of hard work to make sure that if they are looking at property increases, that they're as minimal as they can be. So that definitely is not easy for municipalities, and that's quite frankly what we're facing. It's either we're going to be upping property taxes to cover projects, or just outright canceling projects. Is basically our only options at this point, unless the federal or the provincial government step up with some sort of grant or fill in cash flow for us while we face this. So, but that being said, I mean, we're already seeing it, and I mean, you just see it in the markets right now too, and even with the Canadian dollar, nothing is in concrete, but the marketplace. Talking on the private side of stuff is so volatile right now, right? And it's not helping anyone. The other interesting piece is a lot of municipalities have already gone out to contract or tender with some of their projects too already. So most of us already have kind of those built-in clauses if we have to pull for obviously for financial reasons. A lot of that's built into contracts as they are. And I certainly hope we don't have to go down that route. And I hope this gets figured out before we drag this out any longer.
Talking about contracts and procurements of contracts for municipalities, speaking with municipal leaders from across Canada in the last 2 days, a lot of them have been calling for municipalities to start taking proactive measures to only hire Canadian companies, Canadian workers to do procurement in Canada. Now, this is a motion that has to be done through the province as well. Are you in favor of changing the ways that procurement is done in Alberta to allow only Canadian companies to bid on Canadian municipal procurement infrastructure projects?
Well, from RMA's perspective, we don't have a hard stance on that yet. We haven't heard or we haven't had that process yet through our membership. And up until this point, obviously, free trade is a huge part of what we do, and looking at to our neighbors to the south, there's a lot of great working relationships, a lot of great businesses down there, and vice versa that do business back and forth. So I think we need to think about that too. At the same time, I can't fault anyone out there talking about protectionism of our own businesses and of our own communities and of our residents either. But it's going to be trying to find that balance going forward, and obviously doing what's best for our residents and what's best for our communities too at the same time.
My last question before I let you go, because I know you're a busy counselor, busy president, and I have one final question, and you talked about it a little bit, but I want to dive into it a little bit. The federal government has a massive role to play in these tariffs. Now, we are in an unprecedented time in federal government, and that means Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister's term is coming to an end literally as this next deadline for these tariffs come up. We are uncertain about who the next Prime Minister is going to be, and then there's going to be an election. Do you think Canada and municipalities can weather this federal turbulence that we're currently in while we're looking at what the challenges of a potential tariff could be?
Well, focus first and foremost, I think Canadians are an incredibly resilient people, and we're an incredibly resilient country. And I think no matter what happens, Canada will stand. We will be here. And I think I certainly hope cooler heads and fact-based decisions are made quicker than not. But for that reason, I honestly, I truly think that, Canadians are, and our residents, our communities are, it's the best place to live in the world. And I've done a lot of traveling, so that it does says a lot. And I think we will do our best to muddle our way through this. And I think in the end, I think we will come out on top, and we will be better and stronger because of it. And unfortunately, we just have to deal with a bit of the turbulence that's going on right now across this country. But like I said, I truly believe that we are probably the most resilient people in the world. So.
President, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting. It's always a pleasure. And I feel like this is the first of many conversations about the economy you and I are going to have this month. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for what you're doing, and for your listeners and your viewers too as well.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights on what municipalities are doing to prepare for these potential tariffs that Donald Trump is about to impose. Now, if you have enjoyed today's conversation, please hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to this or watching this. Your support means the world to us. To gain more information about the people and the places that we feature on the show, visit crossborderinterviews.ca today. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll see you next time here on Municipal Affairs. Till then, everyone.